All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. I'll be doing my preview and prediction for North Carolina versus Wake Forest, a crucial matchup in the ACC this Saturday. Wake, -3 right now, ESPN 2, and then 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Truist Field in Winston-Salem is the site of this contest. And then UNC, they lead the series pretty dominantly all time, 71-36-2. And they have also won the last two meetings. Look at this Tar Heel offense. Coming into the year, they had two great ideal replacements for that of Sam Howell. One being Jacoby Criswell, who had an extra year in this Phil Longo system, and then Drake May, who won the starting job and has been flat-out elite for this football team. 71% completion percentage, just shy of 3,000 passing yards, 31 touchdowns, only 3 picks, phenomenal ratio there. And, one reason I feel like Criswell might have gotten the job early on in the year and he did not end up doing so was because I felt like he might be a better fit for what they wanted to do, considering last year Sam Howell's legs were a big part of this offense. I wasn't sure how May would fit into that. 6'5", 220, and he's showcased tremendous speed and running ability, 513 yards. That's a team high, and 4 touchdowns. May, he's just been phenomenal. A dual threat quarterback. He's been very decisive. He's showcased tremendous, arm talent. 3 games in a row now. 4 of the last 5, he's had 70% completion rate. He hasn't had a pick in 3 games. He's just been phenomenal, this year. And 2 of those 3 picks came against Miami. And then he had one way back against Georgia State on September 10th. He's just been so good for them. And, this football team operates from him tremendously. He's the team leading rusher, of course. It's kind of a beat-up backfield. They got a handful of different guys involved. Amari Hampton, he's also a freshman, 358 and 6 touchdowns. Caleb Hood, Elijah Green, Amari Hampton, he's 220 pounds. He's more of a bigger guy. Green, more of a slice and dice at 205. They've been battling some injuries. British Brooks, he was injured way back before the year even started. He was out, so a lot of youth in this running game, only 167 yards per contest. 4.6 yards per carry, though. They do enough to get by because this is a team that loves to operate of the RPO. And they do a lot of throwing the football, though. Josh Downs, 63 grabs, 693 yards, 8 touchdowns. He just put up some career highs against Virginia. I believe he missed a handful of games early on in the season. He's, coming off 3 straight 100-yard games. He's had 26 receptions over the last 2. He's just been dominant. He's really catching heat. This is a team that's only got 1 loss right now. They could potentially maybe somehow sneak into the playoffs. Seems unlikely, but they're certainly fighting right now. And Tony Green, he's really stepped up a wide receiver for them. Almost 23 yards per catch. He's got 6 touchdowns, 597 yards. J.J. Jones, Bryson Nesbitt, he's been a really good tight end for them. Kamari Morales as well, another tight end. They love to use those guys. Kobe Paysour, been a little inconsistent, but he's also a guy they get involved. He's got 3 touchdowns this year. Top to bottom, this is a phenomenal offense. I think the offensive line, it could certainly be better, but I think for the most part, considering how much they had to grow from last year, they were not very good one bit. They had to replace a handful of NFL guys. It was just a bad combo for this offensive front, but they've managed it very well, and this offense has been operating at a high level. Drake May, of course, leading the way, just under 41 points per contest, almost at 500 yards per game as well. Terrific balance. The Tar Heels can't say any more positive things about this offense. They're just so good. Looking at the Wake Forest offense, they're just as good. They've certainly struggled a good bit. Sam Hartman this year. The turnovers continue. 7 picks in the last 3 games, 9 on the year. It's just been a theme with him throughout his career. He just throws a lot of interceptions. He's been around a long time. He's been a starter since 2018. 2,400 yards, 24 touchdowns, though still averages 300-plus yards. He has a great understanding of this offense, great command of this football team. 3 picks in each of the last 2 games, though, in losses where they only scored 21 points. The offense has certainly just been flustered the last 2 weeks. Turnovers really hurt them against Louisville. They got down deep in that one. Gave up like 30 points in that third quarter of that game. It was just over after that. And then they played on the road against NC State, a very tough defense. And this time, they were able to, fend off this high-power offense. They had almost 400 yards passing, but just Sam Hartman did not look very good in that game against NC State. They have a running game that's pretty respectable as well. They get it to Christian Turner and Justice Ellison. They both average over 4 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns between the two. Overall, this running game, not great. 123 yards per game, 25 carries for 17 yards. Sam Hartman, his legs were a good part of this offense last year. He had, 11 touchdowns, almost 400 yards rushing, and this year, not even close. He's only got 33 rushing, 1 touchdown. They've just not used his legs one bit. The offensive line, of course, they've struggled a good bit. They had 220 rushing yards against Army, and that was about it. 171 against Florida State. You had about 151 against Vanderbilt. Other than that, though, they've not been good running the ball. 92 yards on 46 carries against Louisville. It's just terrible. 3.2 yards per carry on the year. They just don't have a running game. They don't really have that balance that they want. Last year I thought they did a great job of running the ball for this style of offense, about 160 yards per contest, and that's right where you want to be. This year, been a completely different story. At receiver, though, they have some great weapons. A.T. Perry, he's phenomenal, of course. Over 700 yards, 6 touchdowns. Jamal Banks has stepped up as that reliable number 2 with 8 touchdowns. They've enjoyed having Donovan Green back, who missed all of last year. 475 yards, 17 yards per catch for him. Keyshawn Williams, another 28 receptions there. A very productive wide receiver group. And Taylor Morton, he's 5th on the team with 27 grabs and 287 yards. He does have 5 touchdowns. They really dish it out into a variety of weapons. I think this is one of the deeper receiving cores in college football, especially with Williams and Banks stepping up this year. Great group of pass catchers that can certainly win. Of course, they're not facing a very tough defense. But the biggest thing is they just need to cut down on the turnovers. 8 of them against Louisville. It's wild. They had 3 of them here against NC State. 11 turnovers the last 2 games. That is just astronomical. That is not very good one bit. They're converting about 46% on third down. That's very good for this offense. But they're just drifting towards being one-dimensional, and that's going to make it so much easier to force Hartman into mistakes, and he certainly has committed them. So it's Wake Forest offense. They've, the last 2 weeks, really started to kind of fall behind here. Again, only 21 points the last 2 games, and not very good when it comes to these interceptions as a team. They've 8 picks in the last 3 games, so need to work on that tremendously. Look at the North Carolina defense. This has not been a very good unit for Gene Chizik this season. It's really been hard to get these guys to blend and play well together. I do think they've played much better the last 2 games. They looked pretty good against Pittsburgh, only gave up 367 yards. Still 6 yards per carry in that one. 400 plus to Virginia. Their defense was kind of able to close that one out, though. Even though, Virginia made it close there at the end, I think they played very well. They held them to 28 points. It's been an interesting unit for UNC. Gave up almost 500 yards passing to Miami. Only allowed 42 on the ground. It's pretty rare to see that. They've allowed 200 plus rushing. 4 different times this year. Gave up almost 200 again to Virginia. So it's just not a very good defense. I do think Cedric Gray, he's had some great games for them at linebacker. He's already up to 100 tackles. Power Eccles right behind him at 75. It's just, another part, Miles Murphy not providing great pass rush for him. He hasn't really emerged like we expected him to. Noah Taylor, he's been good. Virginia transfer, providing some pass rush. 6 TFL, 3.5 sacks. I like him, 6'5", 240. Cedric Gray also leads the team with 7.5 TFL. This has just been a very rough year for this defense. Have not blended well one bit. And you also figure the secondary might take some strides as well. They're pretty talented. They got Storm Duck, Tony Grimes, a former 5-star that, hasn't really been the same since his freshman year. But they still have talented corners, talented DBs. 120th against the pass. This is just a team that gives up a lot of yards. They have another senior safety in Cameron Kelly I like, but this has not been a unit that's really blended very well. For the most part, it's a pretty young front 7, but Miles Murphy is a veteran that should be playing a lot better than he has this year. Just very not good. 2 picks for Cedric Gray's also a team high. There he goes. So he's just really the heart and soul of this football team. Only 6 interceptions on the year for this team. They don't force a lot of turnovers. They don't really get stops too often. They've really been forced to just come up with red zone stops and just letting the offense carry this football team. They give up a lot of yards, especially against the run. This is probably a good bounce-back opportunity for the Wake Forest running attack. And they haven't even been that good in the red zone. They've given up an 86% scoring conversion rate. 76% of that is a touchdown rate. So they've just not been great this year one bit, top to bottom. You've seen it week 1 against Florida A&M, or Florida AMU rather. And it's just been very poor altogether this year. Gave up 400 plus yards against Virginia. They've given up 500 plus on multiple occasions this year. It's not a very good defense. Tough matchup here going on the road for sure. And then it leads you to the Wake Forest defense that's, it's not really any better by any means, but it certainly has much more strength than, North Carolina does, especially this defensive line is very deep. Jasheen Davis, 8 TFL, Kobe Turner, 7.5. Rondell Bothroyd, he was a superstar for them last year. Hasn't been great this year, but he's still an impact performer from the defensive end spot. He has 5 sacks. Kedron Wayman, he stepped up this year, 6'4", 250. Pretty deep defensive line for Wake Forest, I would say. Of course, they don't really stop the run all that well, but they're certainly a productive unit up front, and that's certainly impressive. Ja'Cory John's another one. They're just this is a really deep defensive line. I think it's very underrated. They need to be able to force pressure on the interior, though. Knock Drake May off his spot. They have been, I'd say, pretty well against the run this year. Only 115 allowed against NC State. They don't really run the ball that well. Only 211 for Louisville. They struggled a good bit in that game. They got behind in that one, of course. holding Army to 225 on 53 attempts is really impressive. They've only allowed 200 yards those 2 times. This year it's been 3.8 yards per carry, so they're slightly above average, I would say, against the run. But I think this is a pretty favorable matchup for them here. And that means that Drake May and the UNC offense will probably be one-dimensional. Ryan Smenda, he's a heck of a linebacker, very tough. There in the middle for them. Chase Jones, 44 tackles, that's 4th on the team. He really stepped up this year. The Wake Forest secondary is kind of surprisingly just not been very good. They have a lot of talent. They've really not been able to stay healthy, though. Typically, this is a unit that intercepts a lot of passes. They only have 5 on the year, but in the years prior than that, they've been well into the double figures among the conference highs and interceptions. They've only got 1 in the last 6 or 7 games, it looks like. So they've certainly not really been very good at playmaking, which is unfortunate because I think the potential is certainly there. Just injuries have really hurt them, and they're not very deep in terms of experience either. So I think for the long term, this is a unit that will certainly grow. Kalen Carlson, Gavin Holmes, 2 sophomores at corner. Malik Mustafa, he's a really good safety. They've not been able to stay healthy though. The playmaking's not been there, which has been unfortunate for them, and I think they're going to have some struggles here. One of the worst pass defenses in college football. I think they're certainly going to struggle here against Drake May in this attack. From a yardage standpoint, they've really not been too bad, though, this year. They're only giving about 58% completion rate. Also, 231 yards per game through the air allowed. So they have not been terrible. I do think this is a pretty bad matchup for them. They haven't really faced a strong passing attack in weeks, really. All year, they've not really faced too many strong passing attacks. Clemson, though, they tore them up, 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, and that's a pretty average passing attack as well. So UNC, I think they're going to have some success here. Josh Downs is going to get targeted plenty. Looking at the team comparisons, at quarterback, Sam Hartman, he's been around a long time, but I think the freshman here has him beat. Drake May, I think, is just much better. Just the interceptions for Hartman continue to pile up. He's a veteran at this point. The last 2 games have just been pretty poor for him. Running back, I think they're much deeper than UNC is. Pretty youthful group for the Tar Heels also. The running game for UNC slightly better, mainly because Drake May's legs get involved, but from a pure running back standpoint, neither is really highly impressive. But I'll give Wake Forest the edge there. Turner and Ellison, respectable duo. Wide receiver, I think Wake Forest, they're one of the deepest in the country. I like what North Carolina has too. Drake May has a great weapon in Josh Downs to work with. And Tony Green, I think he's tremendous also. And they're pretty deep themselves, I think, from a wide receiver pass-catching standpoint. Wake Forest has them beat there. The offensive line, I think, has been much better for the Tar Heels. They give them the edge there. Defensive line, it's not been very productive for the Tar Heels. On the other hand, it has been for Wake Forest. They have a strong matchup edge there with the defensive front. Linebacker, I'm going to give Cedric Gray and Power Eccles the edge there. Gray's been terrific. He leads the team in almost every category, it seems. And in the secondary, 120th in pass defense for North Carolina. Wake Forest, they haven't really had much playmaking has been evident, but they've certainly been, I'd say, much better against the pass this season, about 69th in that category. So they're certainly tremendously better than North Carolina at stopping the pass. Keys to the game, final thoughts here. UNC forced Hartman into mistakes. It's been a big theme throughout his career. The last 2 weeks, it's really been a headache for him. He's going to be searching for some confidence. Continue to try to force him into some mistakes here. Utilize Drake May's legs. Continue to do what you've been doing. Obviously, he averages double-figure carries per game. I think almost 13 at this point. And just continue to utilize his legs to extend drives. That's a big thing they've been doing. In every game since week 2. He's had double-figure carries, and he's been very successful as a runner. He seems to continue to get better, too, especially since he's now protecting himself. He seems to be sliding and running out of bounds more, and that allows them to use him more in the running game. Wake Forest, protect the football. That's what you got to do. 11 turnovers last 2 games. It's not a good mark one bit. Keep everything in front of you in the secondary. These guys are going to look to take the top off out of you. And, because you're going to give up yards, you're going to give up points, but if you can keep everything in front of you, when things get into the red zone and get condensed, if you can, hope for misfires and hope for some, negative plays in the red zone to help your defense out, that's going to be the biggest way to do it because you're going to give up yards. It's just going to happen. Prediction, UNC 44, Wake Forest 39 here in a shootout. Wake Forest's mistakes, I think, continue here. I think Hartman's going to make a mistake or two that probably shouldn't happen. And I think UNC will get one more stop or two, and that's going to be the difference maker in this one. It's just there's no way we don't see a lot of points in this one. It's certainly possible the defenses come out and shock you. You see that from time to time in college football where an offensive game ends up being a defensive one. But I think Drake May, it's going to be too much here on the road for Wake Forest. They have a lot to play for. UNC does. They potentially can maybe fight their way into the playoffs. Wake Forest, last 2 weeks, they've not been looking great. Great opportunity to bounce back here and play spoiler at home. I think UNC, though, just too much offense in a shootout. This should be a fun one, though, in Winston-Salem. So make sure you guys tune in. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.